everybody, Konodger here. Welcome back to Assetto Corsa. Today we've got some new mods to look at, some interesting content that has come out, some stuff that's maybe a little bit different than you may have expected. So this is the Civic VTI EG6, which is part of a pack of Civics that are available. This is the Civic SIR2 Group A JGTC, I believe is what it is now called. I think it was called something else back then, but part of that series. And that is essentially an entry-level racing car. And the other one is just the factory EG Civic. I always do that. That is the wrong thing. I want to go to that. Interesting to note that displayed here is a right-hand drive Japanese version Civic. When you see it in game, it's somehow left-hand drive, and it doesn't, I don't know, it seems more like the American Civic SI than it does the VTI. I'm not sure about that. Some cars, you know, have different specs or stages you can choose, and this one does not seem to have that, nor does this one. No, it does not have different stages you can choose. So that might just be a bug with the picture they chose there, or the render they chose to use. Another one I want to look at today is the Chevy Corvette DP road racing car, which has two different versions here. I think it's just the difference in the manufacturer of the chassis, which they are all essentially identical. But they come. This is a really well done mod. This is part of a team that is working on a bunch of prototype and endurance racing style cars, and they want to make it a whole mod series pack, kind of similar to the Formula Corsa guys. So it's pretty well done. As you can see, there's all the liveries available. Partial to the Action Express. I've been a fan of these guys for a long time. This is essentially the same guys that were at one time the Brumos motor team that used to have a Brumos DP way back when. But enough talking, let's get on track. Let's start out with the Civic, the regular one, and see how this game handles front-wheel drive street cars, because we haven't really had too much of that other than the Fiat 500, which is really barely even a car. Alright, so here we are in the stock regular old Civic, and as you can see now, it is indeed left-hand drive, but other than that slight inconsistency, the model is actually very well done. It's I would say on par with the models that are in the factory game. I'm not entirely sure where they sourced this model or if they made it uniquely for Assetto Corsa. I would kind of lean towards that due to the level of detail. And you can even see that when we go inside the car. See it looking around the interior of the car, the dashboard and everything like that. Extremely well done. Very smooth but not wasteful polygon use, and really the only texture that's a little bit not great is the headliner and the stuff like that, but you hardly even notice it. I think the sounds are borrowed from another car in the game. Seems like the sounds at this point are a little bit too hard to be modded, or perhaps people aren't putting the time into them because the sound engine of the game is about to be rewritten and converted to something else. So people are generally just recycling sounds from other cars. So we'll have to kind of just ignore that fact, because that certainly isn't the Honda exhaust note we all know. And this car does feature the B16 A23, I believe. So that's, I've been around these cars a lot, and they are a very unique, high-pitched exhaust and just engine note in general. It's not even the exhaust note, just the intake noise they make, the valve noise they make. They have a very unique sound to them that isn't necessarily generated here. So if you know anything about me, you know that I pretty much stick to rear-wheel drive cars when it comes to real life. I've always had, actually that is true, I've never owned anything front-wheel drive, and honestly I've barely ever driven anything front-wheel drive. Never in a performance situation, but but I know an awful lot of people that do. Obviously, I hang around the autocross circles, and front-wheel drive, pretty commonplace there. It works generally as good, if not in some cases better than rear-wheel drive and autocross, which isn't necessarily the case in regular circuit racing. So, you know, it's much more common there. As far as front-wheel drive cars go in games, I've always kind of enjoyed them. They have a much more fun driving style than some rear-wheel drive cars in competitive situations. They're not necessarily as much fun to drive just out there lapping, but when you're out there door-to-door with somebody, they're so much easier to control and manipulate, I guess is the word I would be looking for. You can really steer them with the throttle, you can steer them with the brakes a lot. So one thing I'm looking for here is to see if I get that kind of back-end slidiness out of it, and then if you get the back end to slip a little bit, you can just kind of push the gas harder than you should so that the front will push out and kind of correct it. I haven't felt it so far, but I'm not really pushing it too terribly hard. This car does have a open differential in the front, which you can tell right there. Decent power band. It's not as peaky as I would have expected. I don't know if that is a good thing or a bad thing as far as realism, but it doesn't have that dramatic kind of strong mid to high peak. I'm going to try and... Okay, I felt a little bit over there, because usually, yeah, when you're on the brakes into the turn or you let off mid-turn, the back end's just going to want to step out a little bit. But then when you're on the throttle, if you're in the right gear, there's that open diff, just burn that tire up. But if you're on the throttle, it'll straighten itself out. That's a good and a bad thing. A lot of times it wants to push the nose right off the track. Grind them gears. Yeah, like right there, see I'm just trying to get on the throttle and it's just pushing wide. But in general, that's much easier to correct than is oversteer. Overall, this car seems to be handling it very well. Not as much sliding out of the back as I would have expected, or maybe even wanted. Live for Speed does a great job with this, especially on the front-wheel drive cars. I felt as though it was very natural and predictable when the back end would slide out. I think a lot of that has to do with probably tire modeling. I don't know what tires they're using on this car. It could be that they're too grippy for a street car. Deep into there. Alright, I think I've gotten a pretty good feel of this one. I don't want to spend all of our time just doing laps. Let's... Oh, there it is. Yeah, I got it going around. It's not very dramatic, but you can sense it in the force feedback, which is nice. And you can kind of tell just by the way the car is yawing that the back is generally stepping out more than the front mid-turn. It's a good thing to have. E-brake will do it too. Alright, let's look at the race car and compare it. Alright, so now in the race car, again, very well modeled, just an incredible amount of detail. Nothing to complain about as far as I can see. I'd like to look at the setup just to see get a general idea of what kind of options it has and what tires they're using. Slick DV3, I have no idea which ones those are, and very minimal setup changes on the car, which is probably correct. This is basically the entry level of the Japanese road racing series, so there's only a limited amount you can do. But I'm pretty sure this car grinds gears, does that? But I'm pretty sure this car has a pretty significant increase in power. Yeah, those sounds are borrowed from something. I can't quite place it what they are, but they're from maybe the BMW, the E30. Yeah, I bet you that's what it is. Lots of backfiring noises. Okay. So let's see the difference. Yeah, definitely a pretty big increase in power, and lack of body roll is very prevalent. I'm really having troubles with this gearbox. Let's see if this one tends to slide around a little bit more. I imagine it will, if I could get the gearbox right. I imagine it will just because of the stiffer suspension. That body roll really absorbs a lot of the on-track movement for the stock cars. So when you put stiff suspension on them, you get a much better feel of what they're doing. And they reach their limits much more suddenly. There we go. That's a shift. Oh yeah. That mid-turn lift really got that back to come around. I'm sure it doesn't show up on camera. It's very hard to describe how it apexes a turn. It's almost similar to how a dirt track car drives. A lot more power. Man. Well, what is up with the gearbox in this thing? Or the driver in control of it? Ooh, that was a little deep. I think it may actually be that I'm shifting much too early as far as that extremely high red line. Let's see what it is. Yeah, like 8600. That's a little bit more than I'm used to. I would show you the chase camera to demonstrate what it does, like how the car pitches around. But the chase camera in this game is absolutely terrible. It's essentially useless as far as I can tell. I don't know if anybody would ever use it. It would be much better with this fixed camera. I don't know why they don't give that option. Here, let's take a look at it. So yeah, this doesn't look that bad, right? But it's the wandering that's so... Maybe it's just me. It's very possible that it's just me. Do you see how the car turns on your camera, but the camera still stays fixed straight? That is extremely bothersome to me. Maybe that's how games handle this kind of view nowadays. Wow, that made me sound old. But I don't like it. It's very distracting to me. Maybe we'll see what the car is doing. Not really, because, like I said, the camera's following the car, so you can't really tell what it's doing on track. Alright, I gotta get rid of that. The other views aren't bad. The hood view is good, but the cockpit view is where it is at. Yeah, that's really fun. That's honestly, this is probably one of the most fun to drive cars I've oh yeah. Burn them front tires up. This must have limited slip. Doesn't one-wheel peel as bad. I think this is as fun as the E30, if not more. Why you no go in? That's my biggest complaint about G27 pedals, or G27 steering wheels in general. It's just the pedal setup is not good at all for heel toe, so it's virtually impossible. a car like this, you really need to use it. Although with front-wheel drive, it doesn't seem like the downshifts are as vital as with a rear-wheel drive car. It doesn't pitch into the turn based off the downshifts nearly as much. It pitches into the turn more off brakes. That is just too much fun. Get sideways, smash the gas. And that's what makes it so fun to do competitive driving, like side by side with these cars. There's no there's fear of running off track, but there's much less fear of spinning out and slamming into the whole field. So it makes for a much more competitive atmosphere. Not the best brakes in this thing. We are talking about early 90s brake technology, which isn't nearly what it is today. But I'm still going to say this is probably the most fun I've had just driving an Assetto Corsa. Even more than the F1 cars and stuff like that, because that's just so demanding. That's the most fun part right there. Slide. Off the gas, on the gas. That's a prime example of something that I'm always trying to talk to people at Autocross about. I'm friends with a lot of people there, and virtually nobody uses 240 SXs for Autocross. So, and basically, I would say, man, here's 2/3 of the field is front-wheel drive cars. And a lot of the people I talk to drive front-wheel drive cars. They don't always understand why my line around the course looks so much different than theirs. And it's just because you gotta drive a rear-wheel drive car, especially a 240 with its obnoxious front weight bias and strange width versus wheelbase. You have to drive it so much more smoothly and consistently. Off track. You have to drive it so much more reserved in order to get a quick time versus when I watch people with front-wheel drive cars. And like I said, I've never driven one on competitive style of track. It just seems like they're much more aggressive with how they point the car. They're very, very snappy with the steering, and then very aggressive with the throttle, especially like out of the turns. I do see it a lot of the times that the back end will snap around, especially off throttle. So that is definitely the case for front-wheel drive cars. But you have that aid there that you can just smack back into the throttle and get it pointed the right way. It's just a very different experience. I'm not saying it's easier. I'm not saying it's makes them less of a driver. I'm just saying it takes a different kind of driving style. So I would probably massively struggle if I got into a front-wheel drive car because I would be driving it so much different than it needs to be driven. Pigman valves. Alright, well, I need to stop, or I'm going to just sit here talking and driving this car all day. And we got one more car to look at, and I'd like to do at least one race. So let me hop on over into something completely different. Alright, now we're at Silverstone in the Corvette DP car. A car that has really kind of revitalized the American road racing prototype kind of series, and was released with a little bit of controversy. Some people were not a fan of this kind of car. It is a tube chassis prototype car. It's a little bit old school, and it is a large part now of the American sports car kind of top tier level of the Tudor Sports Car Championship. It's probably on its way out. There will be a new generation of prototype coming to that series in a couple years, but I still really, really enjoy them being part of the series. The whole Daytona prototype program is something that I've been a really big fan of. We're talking larger displacement V8s. There was at one time the larger Porsche flat sixes, and Lexus had a V8. They were just very brute approaches to a prototype car, and I really enjoy that. I understand the world is changing, and there's a need for more refinement in their prototype style cars, but I'm really glad that we got an era of these kind of cars under our belt. So with that being said, I am excited to try it out. Let's get out of this terrible view. Let's go inside. Strange that we're on the right-hand side. I don't remember. I think they're more towards the middle. I think they sit a little bit more towards the middle than right on the right-hand side. I'll have to look at that. This car is available in iRacing as well, so I would like to do a bit of a side-by-side. If I can scrap together some change to buy this car in iRacing, I will definitely do that. We'll see. Oh, yeah. That's a dramatic change from the Civic we were just in. Again, not sure where they got their sounds. This one sounds like maybe... sounds like they made their own sounds, which is cool. Because that definitely doesn't sound like anything in the game. Alright, let's get going. Oh yeah, there's the race car clutch for you. Pit limiter is on. Pit limiter is off. So last week I was here at Silverstone in the F1 car. Oh, this view is crazy. You can hardly see anything. Which is something a lot of people have mentioned about these cars, especially when they came out, is how limited the view is. Wow. It's so much different than the F1 car. Obviously it's not as fast, but the speeds feel almost kind of comparable. Or at least the grip levels. Oh yeah. A lot more torque to deal with. It's the view that's really the biggest challenge for me right now. I feel like maybe I could improve that by moving my field of view up. Or basically placing my head further up in the cockpit. Car does a lot of bucking. And I don't think that's any kind of mistake with the modeling of it. That is something I've noticed a lot with these cars, is at low speed and off throttle, they buck very violently. Like a couple of years ago, I saw one of the Taylor boys, Ricky or Jordan, they were driving one of these on the street, like as a demonstration, and it was so uncomfortable looking on the street. It can't handle going at low speed. So I guess that's a lot of where that comes from. Dropping gear into 1. Dropped a little bit more, huh? Definitely having a hard time finding my line. Brakes are very strong, but obviously no... That took longer than I expected. Get back going the right way. What was I saying? Oh, the brakes. No ABS. I'm not sure. I think they're using metal brakes still. No carbon brakes, as far as I know, it could be. But it is in the newer generation of prototypes and whatnot, there will probably be ABS and maybe even traction control. So it's just a completely different style of car. This is just a very raw, visceral experience in a prototype format. I just noticed his hands on the steering wheel. Oh, I should be watching the track though. That's a very interesting hand position on the steering wheel. It is a mod, and it is very early in its development. Oof. Bumps through there. But overall, physics-wise, I'm pretty pleased. I don't have anything to compare it with, really. So yeah, it would be interesting to try out the iRacing version just to see how much different it is, or I imagine it's probably going to be significantly harder to drive in iRacing. That always seems to be the case. iRacing has a very unforgiving tire model. I discussed in the episode I did in iRacing there that has kind of improved as of late. Let's see if we can hit this apex a little better. There we go. But it's still a much more unforgiving physics engine in general than is one here in Assetto Corsa. Realistic or not, I can't really be the judge. I've obviously never driven a car of this massive amounts of power. My gut feeling is iRacing's probably pretty significantly more realistic, that level of difficulty. This is not the style of car Joe Schmo off the street's gonna hop in and be able to drive. That being said, I'm driving the car alright, with only one little spin so far. But there is so much more left in this car. Driving this car at top speed, at top performance, will be a totally different ballgame. Turns like that, you could attack so much harder. These cars don't have a significant amount of aero downforce. They do have extremely wide and grippy tires, so they have a lot of mechanical grip. I'd say it feels like there's more mechanical grip than there was in the open wheel cars, but it lacks in the aero grip, and the power curve is significantly different. See, it's a 204, so it's actually not that much slower than I was running in the F1 car. Obviously there was massive amounts of time left in the F1 car. Probably the same for this. Great sounds. These are probably some of the best sounds I've heard in Assetto Corsa. The turbo cars are pretty good too. They need some work. But this makes a nice ring in the ears. I think that heads-up display thing is the best thing that came out of the Formula Corsa guys. That's awesome. It works so well for a format like this, especially since I'm recording today in 720p just because I wanted to check cars out. That's why there's no face cam or anything like that. I'm having some issues with, oof, that was wide, just recording in OBS. It seems to be okay for streaming, but for recording, not so great. Definitely some quality loss. fun over the bumps there. Not really feeling it too much to the wheel, but the car is definitely doing some hopping. Just a couple laps in here, and I've pretty much already gotten over the lack of vision. Once you find your line and your marks, it's really not that bad. The case where it would be bad is actually racing side by side with people, knowing where people are on the track. That would be difficult. Push wide. Alright, well, I think that is actually going to do it for today. I know I said I want to do a little bit of side-by-side racing as well, maybe with some AI cars, but unfortunately I am out of time. Had too much fun just lapping, checking things out. So next week we will maybe take two of these cars, the racing Civic and Corvette DP here, and do some, at least some AI races. And we'll see how they are like to be in an actual racing situation. But until then, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.